Today's guest is another Instagram Live virgin, but certainly has been working in this field for a lot of years. Her name is Mardi Winder-Adams, and we met a while ago, and we've done some collaborations together. She is a divorce coach. Her handle is called Divorce Coach for Women. And there she is. Okay, Mardi, I see. Wait, now she's trying to get in. Let's see. Oop. Wait a minute. Okay, perfect.
Finally here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, great. That was a little iffy in the beginning, but I was just saying, Mardi, I was about to say that you, from colleagues in our community, you are known as one of the sweetest people. And I know my partner just met you through a networking thing, and he was like, she's so nice. So I'm really glad that you agreed to come on and talk with me here, because we always need professionals that our clients feel very comfortable with. And I know your background is also as domestic violence advocate, so you are trauma informed and you really get it.
Yes, thank you, and thank you so much for being here. And I love meeting people. I really appreciate what you and Chris are doing for your community, because the people that are in the situations and dealing with the challenges that you're helping them through, they really need this kind of support and expertise and real world experience of navigating through a challenging divorce, whether it's a narcissist or just high conflict with a difficult person. Yeah.
Yeah. And everyone's difficult at the beginning, right? So sometimes it's hard to tell.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that you have to kind of you have to read the situation as to, is this going to be an ongoing high conflict, or is this just somebody who's in revenge mode or in anger mode or in, just an emotional state that is going to eventually dissipate within a few weeks or even months.
Yes. And we always hope for that, but in mine and Chris's community, that does not happen.
Exactly. You've already got the people that have gone through these really horrific experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. So Mardi, one of the things I think today we're going to talk about how to strategically prepare yourself for any kind of divorce, especially in terms of having a team. But I think let's talk about at the very beginning, people seem to think that they should know how to do it themselves. Do you find that people are like, I should know how to do this?
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, or they say, I'm going to hire an attorney who will know everything I need and all my inner desires and everything else. And that's simply not the case. But that do-it-yourself divorce or post-divorce litigation, unless you've got somebody who's guiding you, helping you, supporting you, if you're dealing with these challenging people, it's going to be tough, because a lot of times your family, your friends, if you're dealing with somebody like a covert narcissist where they've never been a jerk in public, it's hard because people just don't believe the challenges that you're facing.
They don't believe that people like this actually exist until they've experienced something like this.
Yes. And I have to say, I myself, at least to my experience, have never been in a relationship with a narcissist, but I have worked for two narcissists and I have worked with narcissists. So, even though it wasn't a personal relationship, I can't, the amount of time and energy I spent trying to figure out what I was doing wrong that was causing all this problem, I could not, I have total empathy for anybody who is dealing with that with a life partner that they are spending, a lot of time with in their life, and getting out, like your the great title of your podcast and your company, getting out is really the only way to save yourself and potentially save your children.
Yeah, yeah. So before we dive into it, Mardi, can you talk a little bit about your background and what you do specifically?
Sure. So, and thank you again for that opportunity. I'm a divorce transition coach. I'm also a certified high conflict divorce coach. In the past, I have done the court ordered co-parenting training classes in both in a couple of states here in the United States and in Canada. I've been a mediator for almost 30 years, mostly focusing on employment and family cases. My background is also as a domestic violence client advocate for several years, and I've been an executive and leadership coach for the last, oh gosh, almost 15 years. So, um, my background, I guess, is really varied, but I think that, as all of us do when we work in this industry, we pull in other life experiences into helping people get through that divorce.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm thinking you bring decades of experience to the table of things, issues, things we need help with getting through this process in particular. So okay, so let's get into why people, it's a misconception to think you can do it yourself, especially if you're dealing with a high conflict personality, and especially if you don't even realize it. Why is it so important to have a team of people? Because I know immediately people are like, okay, not only can I do it myself, but I don't want to spend money.
Yeah, yeah, and I
Talk
and I
about that.
respect that. Yeah, I mean, I really do respect this. I always have this. This is a perspective I put out there to clients a lot of times. Yeah, I've worked with clients that have been married for anywhere from 40 years to 3 years or less. And what I find is people spend how much time and money did you spend on planning and orchestrating and choosing every little detail of your wedding? It's not unusual, right, for people to spend 40, 50, $100,000 on a wedding anymore and spend months planning. But yet, after they've been in a relationship and accumulated things, now you want to divide everything up in 2 months and you want it to be perfectly fair and you don't want any help. Whereas for your wedding, you had caterers, you had a wedding planner, you had people fit your dress, you had all these kind of things that happen. And having that team is really about allowing you to make the best decisions so that you can maximize your what you get out of the divorce and you don't end up making choices that end up costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax liability, in poor choices, all of those kind of things come in. And having the right team really allows you to tap into the expertise of each individual. Lots of individuals on the team are not going to cost you anything. Having a realtor isn't going to cost you anything. Talking to a certified divorce mortgage lender is not going to cost you anything. Most certified divorce financial advisors are going to offer a consultation. That may be all that you need, and then maybe you just need to hire them for a couple of hours. So it's not necessarily a lot of money, but it gives you that peace of mind so that when you go talk to your attorney, who I really believe is an essential part of the divorce process if you're dealing with a high conflict person, um, getting the right divorce attorney is a big thing, and I know that's a whole different ballgame. But having those professionals so that you feel confident when you're sitting in a mediation room or in a settlement conference or whatever or even if you're in litigation, so that you understand what decisions you're making and are they truly in your best interest, because sometimes things look really good on paper to us as non-professionals in specific industries, and then when we see what happens, we're like, oh no, why did I make that decision? And that's what I don't ever want to see people sitting there thinking that.
Yeah, I love the metaphor that you used of your wedding and all of the time and energy and money that goes into that. But then this completely opposite idea that for divorce, it's got to be done really fast, even though there, in some ways, it's harder than a wedding because you have all this stuff accumulated. You have children together a lot of times. It's a really, really big deal. So I think adjusting expectations is so important. The other thing you mentioned is the big decision of choosing the right attorney to get you through this. I think people don't realize that an attorney, that's going to be at least for our kind of people, that's an intimate relationship.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, your friend's attorney or the attorney that advertises on the billboards or the attorney that somebody at your church or your company or where you work told you was a good person might be a good fit, but they also may not be a good fit. And unfortunately, what I see is I mostly work with women, so I'm going to say women, but this could apply to men as well. Oh, let me just say people. A lot of people go to an attorney that they see is got their name out there, maybe has a reputation for being aggressive
Mhm.
and or fights for your rights and gets every cent, and those that kind of language, those bulldog attorneys, a lot of times they're called. The problem with those people is they don't settle. They don't do any kind of collaborative process, not collaborative law, but just they don't necessarily collaborate with the other attorney. And if you both got really aggressive attorneys, you can just about look at $100,000 starting and going up, because there's going to be multiple motions. They're going to be, fighting out over little silly details that you probably would have been willing to let go. Typically, those aggressive or assertive attorneys don't tend to involve their clients much. So they may be going off on a path that will get you the maximum amount. But if it's going to take you 2 more years to get your divorce finalized, and there's going to be 2 more years of conflict and stress and legal costs, are you really coming out ahead? So talking to the attorney, finding out what their style is. And number two, the big thing is, have they dealt with a high conflict individual? Because if they haven't, and they just say, oh yes, I've done a lot of them, ask for specifics about it. What was the case like? What was the other person like? What were some of the challenges that you experienced? And see if that sounds like what you're concerned about in your relationship. Because, like you said at the beginning, everybody's a challenge in divorce. Everybody is. I'm sure I was in mine, and I was trying to be, fair and settle. But I think that when you hire the wrong attorney, you're you lose money, but you also start to lose confidence in the legal system.
And
and
yourself.
and yourself. Yeah, it's like, well, if I made a bad choice with this attorney, how could I possibly pick the right attorney the next time? And because I work with a lot of attorneys, I can tell you a lot of attorneys, when they hear that combination of a person fired their first attorney, they're calling it a high conflict, or they're talking about being in a relationship with a narcissist, that's already a red flag for a second attorney coming in, because they're starting to look at it and go, is the other person the narcissist, or is this person the one that's got the conflict problem? And so it can be harder and harder to find attorneys, if you do end up having to go through more than one attorney during a divorce.
Yeah, and as you're talking about attorneys, and I mentioned how it's an intimate relationship, at least when you're dealing with these long, awful, chaotic cases, I think that coming out of a relationship where you've been emotionally abused or coercively controlled, it's very hard to make decisions. And I know for our clients, their ex's voice is still really in their head. And so there's a lot of self-doubt. And when you come out of that situation and you just go hire like a pit bull attorney or bulldog attorney, as you said, you're basically in some ways repeating the same cycle, because you're saying, okay, I couldn't, I wasn't I gave my authority to somebody else, and there's no blame here. That's just the nature of these abusive relationships. And now I'm moving into another intimate relationship with someone that, I'm a vulnerable target because I need this person and I don't really know them very well. And I'm going to hand my life over and let them deal with it,
Right.
and not be involved. I think that for people in these situations, it's such an opportunity to sort of start learning how to take control of your own life. And that's why it is so important to not hire these really aggressive attorneys for the reasons you mentioned, but also in terms of personal growth, like, let me pause here and not just hand everything over to another person who's going to run rampant and cost me tons of money. We know that also what litigation bleeds the conflict onto the children if you have children.
Yeah.
So it's really better to try to stay out of court if possible.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a really big decision,
And I really like, and that's something that I didn't mention, and I appreciate you saying it, is that a lot of times the partner who has been the victim of the abuse, emotional, financial, even sometimes physical abuse of the high conflict partner, they perhaps have not made a decision for themselves for years,
Mhm.
sometimes for decades. And now all of a sudden you're making these huge life decisions. And you're right, having the right people that are going to give you the space to think about, what do you really want? And that's one of the things I work with my clients is, what do you see yourself doing 5 years from now? If you're living in New York now and you see yourself sitting on a beach all year round, enjoying the sun and working from home, then there's no point in fighting over whatever property you have in New York, because you know that you don't want it. Now, you don't want to tip your hand and let them know you don't want it, but your attorney needs to know that you're more willing of, you'd be really open to hearing information about a buyout on any property you own as a couple, those kind of things. Whereas if you don't know that that's what you want to do, and you spend all your time and money, in negotiating, mediating, trying to get that property, and then you don't even end up wanting to have it, it's a waste of your time and money. It's better to cut ties and get out. Yeah, I really like what you just said about that time and space to make those decisions.
Right, because you're making those huge, like you said, big life decisions under the most pressure that
Yeah.
anyone could be under. And there's rush to do it, like you figure it out now. And a lot of people just become paralyzed.
Yes.
And that's where a team can help you keep you going, because being paralyzed also ends up hurting your case and your life. When you're not filling out financials on time, it can put you behind the eight ball.
Yeah. And not being able to articulate, like I said, and I think I'm repeating myself there, so forgive me, but not being able to articulate to your attorney, um, you know, I don't want I don't want to waste my time and energy and money on this. I want this is more important to me. And what you said about just being really clear on things is so critical. And that's not your attorney's job, by the way. I really want to stress this. I value the work of attorneys. As a matter of fact, I think at least during the initial divorce proceedings, you really should have an attorney. If you have any kind of assets, if you have kids, and if you know you're dealing with a high conflict person, because you can really get taken advantage of if you don't have that really in-depth legal understanding of what the family code in your jurisdiction is.
Yeah, yeah. And I was thinking too, as you were talking about, understanding your rights. There's something. Well, we both know Bill Eddy. I always say he's like the guru of especially conflict resolution, or trying to reduce conflict. And Chris and I are part of a group called the Amicable Divorce Network, which focuses on child-centered divorce and trying to keep things out of court. I like to say they put a fence around legal abuse. When you talk about collaborative divorce, it's like professionals who care about clients not spending tons of money, litigating and not inflaming the conflict. So one of the things that Bill Eddy has talked about are positive and negative advocates. And so I don't know, Marty, if you know those terms. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, of how it's important to have positive advocates, what that is, versus negative advocates through this process, especially if you have children?
Well, and I have not done the training from Bill Eddy,
Me
but
neither. Me neither.
I absolutely love his stuff. I have most of his books. As a matter of fact, that book Splitting, I think, is
No,
one of the best books to
right.
read. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, and he has that Biff method, which I really like. Just keep your language just really focused on what you need to share. But from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, Lisa, that the positive advocates are the people that are there to support you, to move the process forward, to encourage collaboration when it's possible. And I really believe, even with very difficult people, there is some level of collaboration that can happen.
Me
Whether
too.
that happens because you have some leverage, whether that happens because maybe they do have something that is really important to them that you can, that you can use in your negotiation. And sometimes really difficult partners will come around because of the children, if they see something happening to the children. Not always, but sometimes. And I think those positive advocates are those people that really push you to be the best person you can be during this process, and support you in making those personal growth efforts. The negative advocates, to me, I call them the chaos cheerleaders. They
Oh, I
are the
love that.
people who just love to see things blow up. They thrive on encouraging conflict. They thrive on, I sometimes I think they really thrive on seeing other people in distress and being the person who rides in and saves them. Um,
Mm.
but they're not really saving you. They're really amping up the conflict and creating more problems. And I think sometimes they're intentionally doing it, and sometimes I think they're unintentionally doing it. But the ones to be really careful of, the ones that are intentionally inflaming the conflict, to me, that's the negative advocates, the ones that, you deserve this and you need to take that and don't settle for this and don't let them talk you out of this. Now, there may be good reasons not to talk, not to give up certain things when you're going through the divorce. But if you can give up a little bit to get peace of mind, to get a clear settlement where there's limited options to keep going back and requesting modification, to me, personally, giving up a little bit financially to walk out of it clear and clean and not have to worry about a lot of post litigation divorce by giving them what they kind of want to. I think that to me is the real what do you call it? The real payoff, whether or not you want to do it. Do you want to spend more money, or do you want to walk away clean and not have to worry about it in the future?
Yeah, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about a very close friend of mine from years ago when I was still married. And she said, if you like, and this is long before I was even considering divorce, or actually I was considering because we were talking about it, but it was long before I actually got out. But she said, if you can get out of this with a roof over your head and your kids are okay, really think about that versus like what I deserve and what I'm entitled to and getting what's fair. And that can be really hard to swallow. Is like a lot of our clients' exes are really rich and they feel like they got away and they have the better position financially, but you want to be able to move on with your life. And back to the whole negative advocate thing, I love the term that you said, chaos cheerleaders. I think it's important to remember that negative advocates can be your closest friends and family who are just, they think that justice looks a certain way, or they know somebody who used a certain professional who got a certain outcome for another person. They're like, you should make sure, you should demand that, you should, just like you said, like you deserve this. But that can inflame the conflict. And again, everything bleeds onto the children. So positive advocates can be part of this team of professionals to sort of dissipate the conflict and think, let's just get you through this as unscathed as possible. No one's going to be happy about it.
Right.
But we got to do what we have to do to move it along, like you said. And so it's interesting because Chris has a very good friend from college who's a family law attorney down in Virginia. And we were writing the first book, we were talking to her about it. And we were assuming, okay, if you have a high conflict personality that you're divorcing, it's going to be a high conflict divorce. And she said, that is not the case at all. Because if you have two professionals, let's say, if we're just talking two lawyers versus a team, and they are collaborative or they can work together, they can, if one can manage the high conflict personality, you're not going to have a high conflict divorce. And that's why it's so important to have positive advocates, the team of whoever gets involved with your case, to not be inflaming it and saying, you deserve this and it's going to cost this much, but be like, let's figure out how to get you through this and your family so you could move forward.
Yeah, and to that case in point, I think here's where I see the challenge. High conflict individuals tend to look for the high conflict attorneys. So they tend to already have that, they've got both barrels loaded, for lack of a better term, because they've got that high conflict attorney. They're a high conflict client, and it's almost like they feed off each other.
Oh, yeah.
At some time. So sometimes hiring a very authoritative, well-established, but relatively low-key divorce attorney that is very well respected in your community, in your legal community, sometimes has a huge impact on that, because the high conflict attorney doesn't want to look bad in front of the bar association if you're in the United States, or whatever legal association it is in wherever you're living. And so sometimes having that steadying voice, that positive person who is really saying, no, we don't need to file motions, let's get on the phone and have a conversation, you might be pleasantly surprised with how having that opposite kind of approach to it can be really effective. Now, they have to be knowledgeable about high conflict and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think the worst case scenario are those two high conflict attorneys. And everybody trying to maximize, grab everything they can and get out of the relationship. That's the worst case scenario.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that social emotional intelligence, a quality in a lawyer for people in this situation is really, I mean, it's helpful for anything, but especially in these cases, because they are the ones, like we are both saying, we're going to try to turn the volume down on the conflict instead of
And a lot of times, you know, I'm with a couple of professional groups that do work with divorce, and one of the things that's coming to the surface, I'm seeing a lot more attorneys who are at least taking trauma informed courses, so they are aware of how to support. You know, people who are coming out of this abusive, narcissistic abuse, or high conflict, or toxic personality relationships, where you know that kind of emotional issue has been a factor in the relationship. So if you're feeling really vulnerable and you are feeling, or maybe you're already being treated for post-traumatic stress disorder due to the issues in the relationship, there are some attorneys now that are trauma informed. So that's another thing to maybe, you know, think about looking around for. And again, you have to balance their credentials and their years of experience and all that kind of stuff. But it might be another factor if you are struggling with finding the right attorney.
Yeah, I mean, you can ask as one of your initial questions during a consult, like, can you tell me about any domestic violence training you've had or anything with trauma,
Right.
and just see what they say.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great
Yeah.
question. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what are some other strategic steps that people might want to take as they are in the middle of this process or just starting?
I think the biggest one is to make sure that you are in lockstep with your attorney. So if there is anything that you don't like that the attorney is doing, is that you do that proactively. You talk to the attorney and you say, hey, this isn't working for me. And even if it's the way that you're communicating, I know sometimes in high conflict cases, like you said, you're going to talk to your attorney a lot more than you would in a divorce where you just kind of send in the paperwork and say, we're going to settle in mediation, but just review this, right? You may only see that attorney for a couple of hours. In a high conflict case, you're probably going to talk to this attorney multiple times. So making sure that you and the attorney are able to communicate effectively. And again, you have to be careful because your attorney is not your therapist or your coach or your financial advisor. So you want to make sure you're also using the right professional for the right thing to help reduce the overall costs. I think that's one. The other one I would have to say is if your attorney is experienced in high conflict situations and they are encouraging you to use a specific negotiation tactic or mediation tactic, or they're talking to you about how to handle this, ask questions if you're not sure. But if you've hired them, you have to trust that they are setting you up for success, not for failure. And please don't go behind your attorney's back. Like in a lot of high conflict cases, I know what the attorneys say is please don't have any direct conversation with the other person, especially if they're verbally abusive, right? Because who wants to keep reliving that? So then that means don't pick up the phone, don't answer the text message, don't respond, and setting up something if you are worried about the communication, something like you know, whatever app it may be. I know our family wizard, I like that one because there's all kinds of features that you can use. And by the way, to put a plug in for them, if you can't afford it, you can write to them and they offer complimentary or a year's free services
Really?
if you cannot afford, and it's relatively cheap. I think it's like it's less than $200 for the whole year. And
Mhm.
I'm not affiliated with them. I just think they're a really good company. But you can print out the text. You can keep track of your finances. And there's other apps too. I'm sorry, I'm just drawing a blank on the names, but do your
Oh yeah,
research and
talking
find one of those.
parents.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And what was the other one I was going to say? Oh, yeah, not listening to friends and family for advice. We kind of talked about that. Friends and family may be giving you well meaning advice, but it may not be relevant to your case. It may not be relevant to your jurisdiction. You know, what great Aunt Millie's divorce looked like in 1950 has nothing to do with your divorce in 2024, 2025. So just make sure that you are not using, you know, information randomly off the internet and then expecting that to be what's going to be the reality for your case. So I think those are kind of the big tips. The other thing too is please don't be so focused on being fair that you don't ask for what you really need.
Mm.
And I see a lot of times people do that. Well, I don't want to be seen as greedy, or I don't want to be seen as grabbing everything I can out of the relationship. You spent years in that relationship. Whether you're the moneyed spouse or the non-moneyed spouse, you both contributed to the family, to the household, to the care of the children, all those kind of things. So be prepared to ask for what the reality is, and don't minimize. Don't say, "Well, I was just." I hear this all the time. Well, I was just the house. I just took care of the house. That's a big job. You raised kids, you took care of the house. And a lot of times, one partner has left school to take care of the kids while the other partner went through school and now has a great career. And you may be looking at walking out of the divorce and starting at an entry level position. So don't pass on things like spousal support, child support, that kind of thing. Make sure that you are getting what you need. If you don't want to use the spousal support, that's fine. Put it in a trust fund for your kids or college fund or something, but don't pass on it, because you're entitled to it, and it may be something that helps you set up for, again, your retirement down the line.
Yeah. Oh, very, very helpful. So I was thinking as you were saying that, and the way to find out what you're entitled to is to talk to professionals. And like you said, there's other professionals that don't charge anything, certified divorce lending professionals. There's a number of people that you can ask questions that, again, can help guide you to ask your attorney questions, because those you're going to be paying big bucks
Yeah.
for.
Yes. And things like, here's another one I was just thinking, Lisa, this happens quite often where people, both names are on the mortgage, both names are on the title, both names are on the deed to the property. And the spouse that doesn't have the bigger income wants to take the house in the divorce. Well, can you even qualify for a mortgage? Because you can't just assume the mortgage in most cases, because if you're dealing with a high conflict person, they're not going to make life easy for you and just sign off on everything. You're going to have to go through the whole mortgage approval thing. And I've seen situations where somebody was given or granted or awarded the divorce, the house in the divorce, and got it, and then found out they couldn't qualify for the mortgage because annuity or spousal support quite often cannot be considered as income for that mortgage, depending on where you live, or it can only be counted after 6 months or whatever whatever the term is. So you really need to know these things before you make a legal decision, because once you own that house, you own it.
Yeah, I remember talking to a mortgage professional about that a while ago, and she said another thing you need to do, which I never thought of, is make sure you get your home inspected before you settle on just taking the house, because sometimes there could be serious problems that you haven't realized, and then you get the house, and then you're paying out like tons of money to fix things that you didn't know were even there.
Exactly. Exactly. And, there's so many things that you have to do. But one of the things that I wanted to highlight too, and I know you talk about this with your people in preparing them for post litigation. If you know you've got a high conflict situation, is making sure that the divorce decree and your attorney understands they have to write very specific terms in that divorce decree. So, for example, it's a lot of times now, if annuity or some kind of support is offered for a period of time, and if the individual is older, or sometimes even if they're younger in a higher risk occupation or whatever, they may be required to cover like a life insurance policy, say 200,000, 500,000, in the event that they die, because if they die, all that spousal support and everything stops, right?
Unless it
So,
says that it's part of the estate, that you can go after the estate.
right, right. So make sure that, or that they have to have this insurance and you are named as the beneficiary, so that gives you that cushion, right? But unfortunately, a lot of the divorce decrees that I see say that you have to, spouse A will purchase a life insurance policy for X amount of money, you listing spouse B or party B as the beneficiary, but they don't ever say what date that has to be done by. So if you're dealing
Mhm.
with a high conflict person, they're going to go through that line by line and look for every little loophole, right? So make sure that your attorney understands those loopholes have to be closed before that decree is finalized.
Yeah, we often talk. So my partner Chris writes high conflict parenting plans, and he's putting together a whole course on it. But we always scan other people's plans as well to look for, as with the eyes of someone who is looking for loopholes. Yeah. And we talk about the need for deadlines and consequences. There has to be enforcement language, because it's not if they don't abide by this, but when they don't abide by this agreement or order, what's going to happen? Yeah. I call it orders with teeth. Like, you need teeth, otherwise nothing's going to happen. And then the burden is on you to take them back to court to get another court order to enforce the one that you already have. And it is maddening.
And I hear this all the time. The lawyers will say, well, don't worry, because they're going to have to pay your legal fees. They're not even paying what they're supposed to be paying for the first go round. No. Your legal fees. So I think it's just being really open and honest and talking to your attorney and just saying, look, I know this is going to be an issue. This is the way that, conflict has occurred throughout our relationship. I really need to make sure we have these things sewn up. And typically, once you put the language in there, it's all fine. I mean, a judge's not going to object to more detail in the orders typically. But, again, it becomes one of those, what's in the best interest of you? And you have to make sure that you and your children are a priority through the divorce.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is what you said, the focus is on you. Like, one of the series that we have done with this attorney in Canada called, his name is David Morneau, and he actually wrote the foreword for our book, is called The Client as Consumer. And the idea that, people often spend more time researching a new appliance than they do with the people and issues involved in their divorce. Ultimately, you're the one footing the bill, and you're the one who's going to deal with the consequences of these choices. So it's really, really important to do what Chris and I call take strategic oversight of your case, almost like run it like a business. Yeah. And in order to do that, you need help. You need help getting through it. So I know people are often, they feel isolated. There's a lot of shame. It is the relationship has not succeeded. Nobody goes in thinking that they're going to have this end. Yeah. But you kind of have to get the support to get past that and make these really, really important decisions that are going to affect, entire generations, not just this particular one, but your children, their children, etc.
Yes, definitely. Most definitely.
Yeah. So Marty, can you let people know how they can find you and what in particular that you offer?
So I do divorce coaching. I was up until last year, 2023, I worked exclusively with women. And then I found that I was getting a lot more calls from men who were interested in having some support. So I now work with both men and women. The website that's best to get you to me is www.divorcecoach4women, and that's the number 4, divorcecoach4women.com. And my other website, which will include more of the divorce coaching for men, is www.poscs.com, and that stands for Positive Communication Systems.
Oh, I love it. All right, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's wonderful seeing you as always. And oh, Marty, why don't you mention your podcast, because it's big. I mean, that's how we initially met, and I just did something with you for YouTube.
Yes, and that was I loved our YouTube thing. So I do have a podcast. It is called The D Shift: Redefining Divorce and Beyond. And I think I have 155 episodes up there now. And I also have a YouTube channel under Divorce Coach for Women, and I'm starting to get a lot of videos up there, and especially Lisa's first one in the series, Spotlight on the Divorce Experts. So that was really cool. I really enjoyed that. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, me too. All right. Well, thank you again for returning the favor and coming on here and sharing these tips. I think everybody will appreciate strategies they can use in getting through this process, and to know that there's people like you out there, I think is super helpful. It makes us look good having someone like you on.
People like you that can help people in these high conflict situations. So it was my pleasure. And thank you for teaching me how to do an IG Live. I've never done one before.
You're welcome. We'll do it again.
Okay, sounds great.
All right, take care.
Thanks, Lisa.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.